Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well, and I hope that you were able to enjoy the beautiful weather this last weekend. We got out for a hike. It was quite nice, so I'm hoping that you were all able to do the same, or at least have some time for some relaxation. I wanted to let you know that I have read through your Medium posts on the documents relative to the history of the 24th Infantry in Columbus. So I've given you some feedback via Medium. Please respond to the follow-up questions that I have there, um, and go find that and read that. If you were not able to submit your Medium post yet on those documents, that's okay. You can do it as soon as you get the chance. Um, and if you're in a position where you're needing to kind of catch up because you've gotten a little behind in the class, that's totally fine. It happens to all of us at one point in time. So um, remember that you can always turn in anything that you've missed. My suggestion is to work on the stuff that we're doing right now before going back and trying to catch up. That way you hopefully won't feel like you're falling further behind as you try to catch things up. In terms of the where we're at now, uh, I suggest completing that second medium post. That's the second medium post for Unit 5, the one on the 24th Infantry documents first, before doing anything else, if you haven't done it yet. Because this week what we're doing is we're going to read each other's posts and provide some feedback and comments to one another, and then write one last post to kind of reflect on the different ways that we all interpreted these same documents. Um, and I'll post a different video to show you how to find each other's work on Medium, because it's not as straightforward as I wish it was, but it's not hard to do. So I will post that soon, so you'll have that as well. I did want to make some comments about this assignment, though. As I told a few of you who were able to attend the Zoom meets last week, one of the reasons I give you this assignment is just to kind of throw you into the deep end with a set of primary sources and see what you make of them. This is the work that historians do. So when we read a history book or an article like the ones that we've been working with, any secondary source, these are the kinds of things that historians read. They don't just read one folder, but they read many, many boxes and folders and archival materials to come up with a narrative, to make an argument about the past that interprets those sources. So this is just trying to give you a little taste of that, what it's like thinking about where these documents are housed, what it's like to be in an archive. So some of the stuff that I wrote about in the Unit 5 narrative, and also the conversation we had with Dr. Massoth a couple weeks ago, really got into that question of what it's like to be in an archive, how to find these kinds of things digitally. And as an aside, the comments that she made, if you weren't able to attend or haven't watched that video yet, will be very helpful for doing the final project, because part of that will require you to look for primary sources on whatever topic you choose. And so again, because of the imperfect nature of historical evidence, we have to think very critically about primary sources when we read them. We always have to try to place them in context. I think that was the main thing that I read. If there was one theme to kind of pull out of all of your posts on Medium, was that these sources need to be contextualized. We need to understand what is the bigger picture that they fit into in order to understand what they are about. But again, going back to the nature of primary sources themselves and the historical record, it's always imperfect because evidence about the past was written by human beings who had certain perspectives, who wanted to make certain claims, who sometimes were blatantly racist, who sometimes lied, who maybe sometimes had very good intentions, but that meant that they left out a lot of details about events so that they could make a more positive case. So as historians then, we have to read sources critically in that way of thinking of where are the biases here, what is the information I can use, and then how do I handle contradictory reports, right? And so this folder from Governor Meacham's papers on the 24th Infantry is full of contradictory reports. The first one from Catherine Boone and the Bureau of Protective Social Measures from the state of New Mexico is extremely biased. Just in the tone, you can tell. And this was a government official, right? This was someone working for a government bureau writing about, in very racist terms about the vice, the crimes committed by members of the 24th Infantry. When townspeople, like the mayor, like the board of trustees, the village trustees, like the cashier at the bank, responded and wrote about this, um, they said that the 24th never acted in those ways. It wasn't a criminal element. So that kind of level of oppressive racism is no longer there in their reports. They were the people who lived in the town day to day. And then they argued that the 24th should stay, but they didn't necessarily argue they should stay because they were great soldiers or it was a great unit, but because having that military presence in town gave it the sense that it was a safe place to be, and it was an economic boom for the town. So the businesses would dry up if the 24th wasn't there, essentially, was the argument. And if you'll notice, a few of you read Franklin's letter to the governor. He was the cashier at the bank. He mentions, if a white unit could be here instead, that would be just as good. So all of that to say, there are different levels of kind of implicit and structural racism going on in these documents, even among those who are saying we don't want you to remove the 24th, because they're afraid there will be no military presence if you remove the 24th. So again, these are the kinds of things that historians use as evidence. They have to be carefully thought about, interpreted, placed in context. And this is what historians have to do all the time. So when you read a polished secondary source, you have to think about, this is the kind of work that went on behind the scenes. That's why, we tell you to think critically about the interpretations and the conclusions that an author makes, the kinds of frameworks that they use to interpret their sources, and so on. And just to end, there are multiple stories that we can get from the same set of documents based on the different kinds of contexts that we can put this into. So as a colleague of mine once said, with history, there isn't one right answer, but that doesn't mean that there aren't wrong answers. We can still have really bad interpretations and things that don't take sources into account or don't read their sources critically, and those are problems. But we can have many stories that are all, essentially correct and that add to our understanding of the past. So for example, we could put this story about the 24th Infantry into a larger context of the discrimination that this unit faced as it served along the border. Back in 1917, the 24th Infantry was at the center of the so-called Houston race riot. And I say it that way because the term race riot was often a very racialized way of pointing the fingers at African Americans who rose up against discrimination, to kind of blame them for causing violence. Members of the 24th were court-martialed, and then they were sent back to Columbus, New Mexico. They'd been stationed there previously, as kind of a punishment. They were kept locked up, essentially, under guard unless they had specific duties to perform, for about a year after that event happened. There were a number of the unit as well who were executed, who were put to death for what happened in Houston. It wasn't until 1919 when they served in a battle against Pancho Villa's forces in Ciudad Juarez that they kind of regained some of their standing among people in the borderlands. So again, this could be part of that story. This could be part of the context of the town of Columbus itself, thinking about the placement and what kind of a location the elites in Columbus wanted to present as their town to the rest of the world, usually to the end of attracting more visitors, attracting more settlers. So why would they want to tell this story about the 24th as being positive to their town? The kind of cynical outlook that some of them took was, it's great because they protect our town from potential violence because this is a military unit and they bring economic opportunities. Some of them, though, actually actively fought against racial covenants on housing and things like this. And I'll post a link to a post that I created on Medium about 6 months ago for a presentation on the Mexican consulate in Columbus after Pancho Villa's raid and efforts that the Mexican consul had in conjunction with some of the town trustees to end racial covenant in housing. So as mentioned as well, you know, the members of the 24th had bought homes and had put down roots. That didn't come easy, you know, so there's a bigger story there if we look at the context of the town and locale. We can look at the context of border towns in the 20s. You know, this was the era of prohibition in the United States. So drinking alcohol, distributing alcohol was illegal. People would go to the border, they would go across to Mexico to take part in vice. So all these things that the members of the 24th are being accused of, this was a common accusation of border towns all along the US-Mexico border at this time. The unique kind of spin in Columbus was that the members of the 24th were the ones who were being blamed for it. You know, so again, the point I'm trying to make is that there are many stories that we can tell if we think about different contexts that will help us to better understand the history of these people. I've gone too long as it is, but I want to end with this thought. And it was something that nobody as yet has brought up, but it's this question of whose voices are not present in these documents. What side of the story are we not getting in these documents? We don't hear from any of the members of the 24th. Where might we find their words, and how would their perspective change the way we tell this story?